women's running. Women's running stories.
Hi, I'm Molly Huddle, a professional distance runner, sponsored by Saucony, and two-time Olympian and new mom as well.
Yes, we are thrilled to have Molly Huddle on the podcast, and she is here to talk about how it all went down at the New York City Half Marathon, which took place last weekend, Sunday, March 19th. Before we get to that, though, welcome to Women's Running Stories. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I am your host and producer. And welcome to another one of our race reports. I am so excited to have Molly on the show for so many reasons. Molly is, yes, a two-time Olympian. She is also a national champion multiple times over. She has set American records. She is a legendary champion in running. And she is also a very strong voice in the sport. Molly has written articles about running. She, along with her co-author Sarah Slattery, came out with the excellent book How She Did It, which was published just about a year ago. If you haven't gotten your copy, I highly suggest that you do. Molly is also the co-host, along with Alicia Montano and Rasheen Magedigan, of the fantastic podcast Keeping Track, where they highlight the stories of women athletes, often runners. And as you've heard me mention on this podcast many times, we teamed up with Keeping Track and Hear Her Sports to form the mini women's sports podcast network, Keeping Her Forward. And that small network has recently joined Evergreen Podcasts. So yes, we, along with Keeping Track and Hear Her Sports, are proud members of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Getting back to Molly, she is also a new mom. She gave birth to her daughter Josephine in April of last year, and she has been very intentional about publicly documenting her pregnancy and postpartum journey and the changes that motherhood has brought. On the racing scene, Molly started back to racing, doing some local races here in New England last year, and she made her return to the national stage just a couple months ago in January at the Houston Half Marathon.
I feel like Houston was the first race since having my daughter where I was like, I wasn't up in the front of the race, but I worked my way up to a time that was like, relatively close to a pre-baby fitness level. So that was exciting because every race I had done before that was kind of building, and they were a little bit rough. They weren't races I normally would have done in the shape I was in, but this is something that's just a long process, and I wanted to race throughout it. Otherwise I wouldn't race for, a year. So this was the first time after, I think it took 5 or 6 races and maybe like 8 months before I felt close to, my old competition level. Still not there, but close. And then I was hoping to build between that and New York Half. But it actually was a tough month. I was actually supposed to do the US Half Championships a few weeks before, and I ended up canceling because in 1 week, I had a really good workout and then sprained my ankle and then got COVID. So it was like quite a roller coaster of a week. I was like, that's the best workout I've had, since before, like probably a year before I had JoJo even. And then, yeah, turned my ankle and it was pretty bad. Like I got an MRI on it just to make sure I didn't break anything, and got sick with COVID, which fortunately wasn't too devastating. Like everybody in the house just felt a little bit bad for a few days. And luckily my runs didn't feel too bad when I did come back, because I do know quite a few runners have had basically long COVID. Like they don't feel good in workouts or races for, up to 2 months. And I was worried about that, but luckily I felt fine in my very next workout. But the ankle kind of was affecting my mechanics. That's like, I haven't sprained my ankle badly in a long time. And it is one of those things that seems like, oh, just put some ice on it and give it a week off. But then there's always a lot of biomechanical stuff. I think distance runners are just so finely tuned and everything is so repetitive that like I always have some kind of compensation after. So going into the race, I felt like I wasn't quite as efficient as normal, and I was a little worried about it. But I had hopes for a marathon after this, so I didn't, I really wanted to kind of get back in the game and not lose too much of what I had planned on the calendar.
With some cautious optimism around that ankle injury, Molly lined up on March 19th to race the New York City Half Marathon. She is a 3-time winner of this race with back-to-back-to-back wins, 2015 to 2017. But the course has changed since Molly last ran it. It's a little hillier, there are more turns, and as Molly described it, along with the potholes that you dodge in New York City, it ran a little bit more like a cross-country course, which is another way of saying it's tough. And she was up against some great competition. Towing the line with her was returning champion Sinberi Teferi, as well as 2-time Olympic silver medalist in the 5,000-meter Helen Obiri. There was top Canadian pro Natasha Wodak, as well as several top Americans, Des Linden, Dakota Lindworm, and Erica Kemp among them, and they were all ready to throw down on Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, we get up at 4 a.m. for a 7 a.m. start, and the bus leaves at 5, so I had to sort of wedge a lot into that hour because I had to pump and eat and get all my gear on, and usually I like to foam roll and stuff. And then we bussed to Brooklyn, which I think it took about 75 minutes. There was a lot of traffic. So we didn't have a ton of time to warm up. We got there at like 6:15 and the race started at 7. But I had to do a quick TV interview at like 6:40.
Here with a familiar face, a 3-time champ here in Molly Huddle. Your first time back here in New York City, though, since giving birth to your daughter last April. How has your pre-race routine and the training changed since then?
It's definitely a little different. My training, I'm still a little bit lower volume.
So I was kind of just like darting all over the place. Like I almost forgot to put my uniform top on. I like unzipped my warm-ups and was like, I don't have my bib number on. And like I was just running around like a crazy person. But on the starting line, I kind of looked around and I knew who was there and I knew what fitness some of the women were in based on like some of their races in the last month. And so I had kind of already looked and said, I think you can race with this woman and this woman. And I talked on the bus with Natasha, one of the Canadian athletes, and she mentioned what pace she was aiming for. And I was like, okay, I think we'll have a little group with like these 3 or 4 ladies. I know I can't run, whatever Helen Obiri is going to run today. I probably can't run that just because this last month was so tough. And I already kind of was a little behind. Like I was a little behind with the maternity leave and everything. So I thought, you're definitely not going to go with whoever the first 2 or 3 are if they end up going, anything under 5:20. Basically. So I just had those little like cautious rules, but the weather was tough. It was pretty chilly. It's March in New York. You have to expect that. And it's very early in the morning. It was 7 a.m. So I think it was 31 or 32 degrees and the wind was just like really cutting through you. But I tried to wear as many clothes as I could under my race uniform, which is typically not that much fabric. So luckily I was warm enough, but yeah, it was a chilly wind for a lot.
Definitely see those runners in layers because we have current temperatures down into the 30s, but it feels more like the 20s. Those gusts up to 30 miles per hour can really slow things down. Brian?
Not exactly ideal racing conditions, but here we are for yet another incredible running of the United Airlines NYC Half as the women get set to take their mark.
I just wanted to find a pack, and that's what happened. It split up pretty quickly. I don't think the first mile wasn't too bad up front, but then their second mile, it sounds like, was 5 minutes to try and break it open. So, I wouldn't have gone with that in the shape that I'm in. So it was a pretty easy decision. And we had a great group with us. We were kind of changing the lead a little bit, and we always had someone to run with in the wind. So that was great. It was myself, Erica Kemp, Natasha Wodak. We were kind of chasing down Dakota Lindworm, and Des was behind us, kind of like catching us the whole race. So that was what my focus was, the race within the race, and just trying to do my best in that pack and manage my body as best I could given the last month that I've had. So yeah, the ankle, I definitely wanted to feel it out. I didn't want to, I wanted to be open-minded and just say every 5K, like if you need to back off. If you need to drop out, you might need to do that. You might feel okay. Like you'll know by halfway how this is going to go. And I'd say I felt a little inefficient, but I was still able to race the people I was around. It was great to have those women to run with. Des was like surging at the end, and I was like, yes, like race Des, race Dakota. Like this is great. Like the last few races before Houston, I felt like I would just fade so badly. And in Houston and in New York, I was like so happy to be like battling people at the end again. Cause to me, that's like why I line up, that's like a good race. That's like a sign that things are working or progressing. Like when you're with people at the end and trying to pass them and trying to like squeeze out that last like 100th percentile. So that was good to feel. Obviously I let the leaders go. They ran a really fast time on a very difficult course on a very difficult day. That was like definitely worth a few minutes, I think, that course and that weather. So that Helen and Teferi ran in the 67s is like pretty crazy because they're probably much fitter than that.
My name is Cindy Burnett, and each week I interview at least 2 traditionally published authors on my podcast, Thoughts from a Page. We talk spoiler-free about their books, so you can listen whether you have read the book or not. And then we delve into things that you most likely won't hear about anywhere else. The importance of the cover design, why they included various aspects of the story, personal details about both the books and the authors' lives, and so much more. You can find the podcast on every major platform and learn more about it on my website, thoughtsfromapage.com. Thanks so much for checking it out.
Helen Obiri did come away with the win, and Teferi, last year's winner, came in second. Molly had a strong race, finishing as the 3rd American behind 5th place Des Linden and 6th place Dakota Lindworm. Molly did report that she did have some irritation from that ankle sprain, and time will tell how that all susses out and what she's going to put on the calendar next. But that is not the end of Molly's story here. Like I mentioned up top, Molly has been very deliberate about sharing her pregnancy and postpartum journey, and it was no different here.
Like merging motherhood and your career is just such a like fraught topic in America. Like it's just, we have so much work to do to make that easier and better. That's why I want to talk about it. And I talk about it a lot. So if I talk about it a lot, like I'll get asked about it a lot. Like I'm very grateful that New York Roadrunners uplifts the runners in the race so much. I think they really do a lot, especially the women's side, the women's fields. They really do a lot to bolster us and, like make us shine. And so I'm always like really grateful for that New York Roadrunners do that, and that they will take that time and spend it on me in a race and say like, Molly, we want you to be the spokesperson for this race, where we want to work with you and, bring you more to the fans, like bring you more into the spotlight of the sport because of this storyline, maybe not because you're about to win the race.
Over on the women's side, Molly Huddle, the American who's won this race 3 straight times from 2015 to 2017. She is back for the first time after having her first child in April. But the defender...
Also in the field, we see Molly Huddle. 38 years old. She's still got so much running left in her. She's a 3-time winner here at the New York City Half Marathon, and she's a 2-time Olympian, obviously. But I think her best stat so far is that she's this new mom, and so we have to give her a little shout out because JoJo is back home watching mommy.
Of New York City, as a 2-time Olympian and a former American record holder, Molly Huddle has plenty of experience competing against the world's best. But 11 months after welcoming her daughter Josephine, Huddle is tackling a new challenge by learning how to navigate her career as a professional runner and a mother.
As a female athlete, planning your family is something you think about really long term because your body is your business. The priority shifts from your...
I do think it's a powerful conversation to have, to note how much more physically demanding it is on the female athlete. Like the physicality of the motherhood is like undeniable especially when you're breastfeeding, and your body is the one that changes, and you have so many hormones that are different and like not necessarily supportive of sports. But I suppose some other changes maybe are supportive of sports, like the endurance side of things seems to get better in some women. But yeah, it's definitely such a big effect on the woman. It's almost like coming back from an injury, even though it's not an injury. Like it's this huge journey, and you've probably heard it before, where someone is saying, don't just say that moms are amazing or moms are so strong, like actually help them. Like they're amazing because they're always swimming upstream, or they're strong because they're like shouldering way too much. So like, let's actually help them. And I like this, the lack of support is really resonating with moms. I think it's a problem that we have, obviously. But yeah, I think no matter what career you have, it's like there's just that tension that everyone relates to if they're in that position. So like that's, I think, why women are stepping up and maybe taking the storytelling into their own hands, because they want it to be for a cause, for an end that will make this easier, or like work better, or like less stressful, or just take the tension out of, like, for example, like the career motherhood struggle. So it's like productive storytelling. Like it's not just girl power, like we're strong. It's like, well, we also, like, we want this to happen. And so this is what we're going to show you and tell you. And yeah, there's a lot of activism behind it.
Molly has seen up close how powerful that activism can be.
It's amazing how much has changed in a short amount of time. Like, I know it's not by any means fixed, but just like, for example, what Alicia was able to do with Ann Mother in a few years is like pretty unprecedented.
The Alicia that she is referring to is Alicia Montano, Molly's friend, as well as her co-host on Keeping Track. Alicia herself is a former professional runner, an Olympic medalist, a multi-time national champion, and the mother of 3 children, and she has become a leading activist for moms in the world of elite and professional running over many years. And these days, her activism is most prominent through the work she does with the organization And Mother, which she co-founded on Mother's Day 2020. And at this year's New York City Half Marathon, Molly benefited directly from And Mother's work.
Starting right at the half marathon, they had lactation support. Just, yeah, so crazy to see that show up at, one of the next races I was doing. Like, I was like, where am I going to pump? Oh, like, Ann Mother is right here at this race. It's amazing. Even if it's not something that gets widely used, just like that it's there and reminds people that, like, lactation, if you're going to breastfeed, you're doing it every 4 hours, like for like a year. Like, it's a lot of time and energy. And so it's going to affect your career, and we need to make it easier. And that starts by having places and time for you to do it built into the day. And so, like, that's just a conversation that's important. And that was really helpful to have.
Lactation stations are just some of the important changes that have been taking place to support professional runners with children or who want to become moms. Back on the racing front, as Molly is moving through her postpartum journey and returning to elite-level racing, she's been thinking through what comes next.
I'm sort of in a new phase of my career where I don't feel like I have to prove anything. Like, this is just for me chasing down the goals that are special to me that I have left. And I don't feel like I need to, like, really kill myself or, like, hurt myself if I don't want to. That being said, it's still hard to go into a race with the adrenaline pumping and, like, be 100% aware, even at this, like, veteran stage in my career. Like, I'm still sometimes not 100% aware of what I'm doing to myself. But I do think I've been a lot more gentle and a lot more just like, yeah, I don't know. It's like you take care of a little baby and then you look at your own body and you're like, okay, like, I'm only going to be constructive. I'm only going to do empowering things. Like, I'm not going to train through an injury if I don't have to. That's just my new viewpoint on the sport. And I do love it. Like, even this last few years when I haven't been quite in the hunt for the win, like, not my past peak performance self, I still love it. I still love finding the pack that you can race, that you should be racing, and just like hanging on and then trying to battle to the finish line and how that feels. And, seeing so many familiar faces at the races and just that whole running community is just really nice to be a part of and visit every couple of months at these races. And I like to train for something. Like, I don't like training for no reason. Like, I like to have that race out there, and there's still things I haven't done yet in the sport that, like, challenges I can set up that I want to do, like running standards or running certain road races I haven't before, or trying to PR in, like, certain events. Like, I feel like the marathon, I still have a lot to learn in that event. So, I want to do maybe like 1 or 2 marathons before the trials and just get more under my belt. I've never raced in the super shoes for marathon distance. So I guess that might have an effect on the race and I might run faster. So, just like the novelty of that and the running community and just being able to challenge myself right at that edge of, like, what I can do, like the very edge of what I can do, is something I'll always like doing. Yeah, just want to try and run a few fast races before the trials, and then we'll see what happens after that.
I will be excited to follow along and see what does come next for Molly in her racing, as well as all of the other ways that Molly shares her voice through podcasting and book writing, articles, and wherever else she decides to focus her energies in support of women athletes and moms and moving the sport forward. Thank you so much, Molly, for coming on the show. It has been a long time in coming. I've wanted to have Molly on the podcast, and I am just so happy that the time has finally come. I, of course, will leave all the information you need in the show notes to keep up with Molly and the Keeping Track podcast. I will link to the How She Did It book and also to And Mother, and you can follow up and see all the great work that they are doing. And thank you to you for listening. I always value you being here. That is going to do it for this race report. I am Cherie Louise Turner. I'm your host and producer. I do wish you healthy, joyful strides forward. And for a little bonus here, Molly did share which super shoes she is excited to try in the marathon. So I'm going to have her close it out. Here's Molly.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, it's taken a while to find the right fit for me, but the current ones, it's like Endorphin Elite version that Saucony makes. I really like these ones. They're more, to me, they feel like they're more for like a toey, like a runner who gets up on their toes. Some of these shoes felt more like they were built for a heel striker, so I just struggled in them. But these ones I like a lot, so I'm really eager to run a marathon in them, even though I still am like, I can't wrap my head around how we're all allowed to wear these. But I'm just like, this is what we're doing now. Okay, I like these shoes. I guess I'll just see how many minutes I can shave off with them.
Women's running. Women's running stories.
My name is Cindy Burnett, and each week I interview at least 2 traditionally published authors on my podcast, Thoughts from a Page. We talk spoiler-free about their books, so you can listen whether you have read the book or not. And then we delve into things that you most likely won't hear about anywhere else. The importance of the cover design, why they included various aspects of the story, personal details about both the books and the authors' lives, and so much more. You can find the podcast on every major platform and learn more about it on my website, thoughtsfromapage.com. Thanks so much for checking it out.